Compressed gas policy. Purpose. This policy is intended to increase awarenesses of and ensure that the hazards associated with compressed gases are recognized and the necessary safeguards for storage, handling, and operation are utilized. Scope. This policy applies to the use of high-pressure cylinders, example oxygen and argon, and low-pressure cylinders, example acetylene, for compressed gases by Plaas Incorporated employees and its contractors. The policy is limited to gas cylinders and cryogenic liquid containers manufactured in accordance with the Department of Transportation. Acetylene tanks are considered cylinders for the purpose of this policy. Inert gases are included in this policy. Policy. To ensure safe and proper use of pressurized portable gas cylinders and containers during storage, handling, and operation activities. Application. The compressed gas policy is applicable to, but not limited to, the following: oxygen, acetylene, argon, helium, carbon dioxide, argon, and other gas mixtures, proprietary gas mixtures, nitrogen. Procedure. Do not open a cylinder valve unless you are familiar with the contents. Compressed gas operation shall be kept free of and away from combustible materials or sources, heat sources, electrical cords and cables, and used in well-ventilated areas. Cylinders shall not be located next to or beneath curing, gouging, or welding operations. The contents of the cylinder must be clearly identified. Do not rely on the color of the cylinder or cap for identification. If the labeling is unclear or defaced so that the contents cannot be identified, then call the gas supplier for a replacement. Do not damage or deface the cylinder markings. Never try to identify a gas by its odor. Remove all gas hoses and torches from confined spaces when not in use. Do not grind or weld on cylinders or heat from a cylinder or regulator. Always inspect the connection fitting for damage, missing seals, debris, or grease, and oil before assembling. Never lubricate cylinder valves or regulators or hose connections. Never hang materials or objects on the cylinder which would interfere with the quick closing of cylinder valve or regulator, which would impede its operations. Cylinders shall not be used as rollers, anvils, supports, or for any purpose except as a gas cylinder. Transferring contents from one compressed gas cylinder to another is prohibited. Do not tamper with cylinder valve and safety relief devices. Cylinder storage. Compressed gas storage areas must be properly labeled with signs, full or empty. Cylinders must be stored in their proper location. Full cylinders shall be stored separately from empty cylinders. Cylinders shall be stored in groups according to the type of gas contents. Full or empty cylinders shall be secured and stored in an upright vertical position at all times. Full or empty cylinders shall be secured individually or in a tight bundle to a fixed structure to prevent tipping and protected from external physical damage. Standalone unsecured bundles are prohibited. Straps or clamps should be used to secure the cylinder instead of wire, bungee cords, or rope. Straps should surround the cylinder at approximately 1/2 to 3/4 inch of the height of the cylinder. Do not strap the cylinders through the cap venting holes. The protective caps shall be kept on all cylinders in storage and when not in immediate operation. Do not interchange protective caps between cylinders. Caps should be hand tight. Cylinders permitted to be inside of buildings must be in designated areas away from aisles or motorized pathways, stairs, or elevators where they could be knocked over or externally damaged. Cylinders shall not be stored near combustible materials or sources or in an unventilated area. Cylinders shall not be stored in locations where an ambient temperature is above 125 degrees Fahrenheit. Empty cylinders must have their valves closed and the protective cap in place. Oxygen cylinders in storage shall be separated from fuel cylinders by at least 20 feet or by a non-combustible barrier at least 5 feet high having a fire-resistant rating of at least 1/2 hour, 30 minutes. Fuel gas cylinders should be stored outside of buildings. Gas cylinder safe handling. Cylinders shall be visually checked before use for dents, gouges, bulges, arc burns, heat damage, corrosion, pitting, missing labels, leaking, damaged cylinder valve, or safety relief devices, etc. If a cylinder is found to be in poor condition, call the gas supplier for replacement. Always assume a cylinder is full and handle accordingly. Do not slide or drag a cylinder. The cylinder may be rolled on the bottom edge. Cylinders shall not be struck or dropped or permitted to strike each other roughly. Cylinders shall be removed and hoisted in equipment designed specifically for this purpose. Cylinders shall be transported on a hand truck with the cylinder secured and the protective cap in place if moved more than a few feet. Cylinders shall not be lifted by the protective cap slings, choker, or lifting magnet. All cylinders shall be handled in essentially the upright position 45 degrees to 90 degrees. Gas cylinder use. Never take a gas cylinder into a confined space. Cylinders shall be secured and used in an upright vertical position at all times. Do not use a compressed gas cylinder without a pressure-reducing regulator attached to the cylinder valve. If the protective cap is frozen or corroded in place, do not hammer on the cap or try to pry the cap free with a bar or screwdriver. Contact the supplier in order to obtain a cap wrench. If the cylinder valve does not operate properly, do not attempt to force the valve to turn. Before connecting a regulator to the cylinder valve, the valve should be opened slightly, cracked, to clear the port and closed immediately. This should be done in a well-ventilated area. Stand to one side of the outlet, not in front of it. Do not crack the valve for acetylene cylinders. Open the cylinder valve slowly to control pressure surge after the regulator is attached. Cylinder connections shall be checked before and periodically during use for leaks with a leak detecting solution or soapy water. Never use a flame to detect a gas leak. Use the cylinder valve for turning the gas off, not the regulator. Cylinder valve shall be closed and hose pressure bled down when not in immediate use. Cylinder valve shall be closed, the regulator removed, and the protective cap installed when not in use before transporting the cylinder. Cylinder valve cap shall be hand tightened only. Always leave some residual pressure in the cylinder. Never completely empty a cylinder. If accidentally emptied, never leave an empty cylinder valve open. If the cylinder valve port becomes clogged with ice, thaw it out with warm water applied only to the valve. Ineligible, inoperative, or damaged regulators shall not be used or removed from service. Regulators must be in good working order at all times. Use an approved regulator for the type of cylinder, valve, and gas. Do not attempt to force or adapt regulators to a cylinder valve. Do not stand in front of the cylinder gauges while operating the cylinder valve. Always back off the pressure adjusting screw on the regulator before opening the cylinder valve and after use. Close the cylinder valve and release the downstream pressure before disconnecting the regulator. Use the cylinder valve for turning the gas off, not the regulator. Do not attempt to repair regulators. Oxygen. Oil or grease shall not be used or near oxygen cylinder, valves, regulators, or hose connections. Do not handle oxygen cylinders, regulators, hoses, or torches with oily or greasy hands or gloves. Oxygen valves shall be fully open when in use. Oxygen shall not be used as a substitute for compressed air for supply to pneumatic tools or as a source of pressure for cleaning to blow off clothing. Acetylene. Acetylene equipment uses left-hand threaded connectors. The tightening nut will have a hash mark or notches cut indicating left-handed thread connection. Use only regulators designed for acetylene service. Acetylene and MAPP cylinder valves shall not be opened more than 1/2 turn. Acetylene shall not be used in excess of 15 psig. Acetylene cylinder outlets shall point away from the oxygen cylinder on oxyacetylene outfits. Never store or transport acetylene cylinders on their side, the flat position. Use only in the valve end-up position. If supplied with no cylinder hand wheel on the valve, use the proper cylinder wrench provided by the gas supplier. Pliers and other imported tools are not to be used to open cylinder valves. Leaking cylinder. Cylinders with leaks that cannot be stopped by minor adjustments shall be taken to an open area away from possible ignition sources for oxygen and acetylene and shall have the pressure relieved until discharged. Install a protective barrier tape to cordon off the area. In the event of a fire, the cylinder valve should be closed if possible. If burning occurs at the cylinder valve neck, threads, or safety relief device, do not attempt to extinguish the flame. Immediately evacuate all personnel from the area, notify your supervisor, and summon emergency personnel.